Here I have my pressure, temperature, saturation properties handy with me. This one is for R404A refrigerant for a project that I was doing recently. Our first step would be to go to the Insert tab, go onto the Charts, Scatter Plot, select one without markers because it's definitely less messier. So when you click on that, there's an immediate charting of data that Excel thinks is important. We can go ahead and delete those. So now we can add our own information here, the series name, which I will keep as PT characteristics. On my x-axis, I will plot the pressure values here. I click on my first cell, I hit Control Shift down arrow, enter. Do the same thing with my y-axis, which I want to plot my temperatures on. Click on the first box, Control Shift and down arrow, hit enter, hit OK a couple of times. So now you have the curve that defines the saturation temperatures with respect to saturation pressures. So now comes the interesting part. You click on it, right click, add Trendline. So a new line is now created, and the equation that represents that particular line is now in our control. Our role now is to create or ensure that this trend line closely matches the line that our initial plot has developed or has given us. So on the right hand side, you get a new Format Trendline panel where you can actually select the kind of graph that is represented here. At the moment it's at linear. If I hit logarithmic, there looks to be some deviations that still persist. So we move forward with the next set of lines. And in most cases, where in the applications that I use these on, the polynomial equation of a higher order usually is the best bet to give me a very, very close value. So here, as you can see, the trend line is closely following the curve of our original trend path. On the right hand panel, you can see display equation on chart option and a display R squared value on chart option. You go ahead and click those. This represents the equation of this new trend line you've plotted, and this represents how close that trend line is to your original line. What you could do is right click on this Format Trendline label and change the format of that particular label to a text, and you'll notice immediately that the entire label is now in an expanded form. An important tip here is that you'll notice that the R squared value is so much. Although it looks good enough, or it looks as though it converges to 1, it's possible to go even further or get more accurate values. In situations where your trend varies to a significant amount, you won't get a high enough R squared value. What you could do is split the entire graph into two separate parts, like I've done here for your convenience. I've split that same graph into two negative terms and positive temperature terms, and then provided equations separately for them. And in doing so, you get a higher R squared value, which gives you a higher level of accuracy. So the next step would be to copy this entire equation and paste it into a cell. So I've pasted it into this cell. As you can see from the equation, it references a value of x. So I substitute that particular value of x with another box here. So this box I reference. So when I double click, it references that box. So I change whatever value I need to here, let's say 75, and I get my corresponding value of temperature. I can go ahead and test this out in my properties, for example. Since this first one is for my negative terms, this is for my negative terms, I will look up pressure values in the negative region. So 9.35 psig, 9.35 should give me 35 degrees Celsius, which it does. What about 48.14? 48.14. It gives me minus 10, which is accurate. So the beauty of this is not only do you get to look at data from on this table, but it automatically extrapolates data between these values as well. So this is especially useful in situations where you're doing a study of the parameters or how certain parameters vary over a long span of time, and you want to chart the other properties of that particular parameter instantly without having to look through a table. This would be a best bet. So now I plotted the negative terms. What you could go ahead and do is plot the positive terms as well, which I've done here for your convenience. And now you have two sets of equations. Now our job is to combine these two equations into a final equation. And now when I say that if the value of this pressure is below a certain point, then I use one equation. If it's above a certain point, I use the other equation. So now I've put in an if statement here, a fairly straightforward if statement, and provide an option for Excel to choose which appropriate value of pressure needs to be taken into consideration for determining this temperature.